Welcome to Hearts and History, where we explore how love has been expressed, written, and celebrated across generations and cultures, through calming, story-driven documentaries made to ease the heart and mind. If you find comfort in these tales of connection, please subscribe and share with others seeking beautiful stories. Tonight, we journey along ancient trade routes where romance bloomed beneath starlit desert skies. Settle in and let your heart wander with us. This is the Silk Road of Hearts, a story of tender romances formed between travelers and locals along ancient trade routes. We'll discover letters, tokens, and parting gifts exchanged between strangers who shared only a night beneath the same desert stars. In golden landscapes and twilight caravans, love found a way to bloom even in the briefest of encounters. Let these gentle tales of connection guide you softly into peaceful rest tonight. Chapter 1. A Time of Sand and Silk. Picture the great trade routes that connected East and West for over 1,000 years. Across vast deserts and mountain passes, caravans carried more than silk and precious spices. They carried dreams, stories, and the tender hopes of human hearts seeking connection. In this golden age of exploration, when the world seemed both infinite and intimate, love found its own pathways through the sand. The Silk Road was not a single path, but a network of routes stretching from Constantinople to Beijing. Merchants, pilgrims, and adventurers traveled these dusty highways for months at a time, sleeping under foreign stars, learning new languages, and discovering that the human heart speaks the same language everywhere. In remote oasis towns and bustling trading posts, unexpected encounters would change lives forever. Romance bloomed in the most unlikely and beautiful places. In the great trading cities along the route, Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashgar, marketplaces buzzed with languages from across the known world. Persian merchants haggled with Chinese silk traders while Arab scholars discussed philosophy with Byzantine pilgrims. In these cosmopolitan melting pots, cultural boundaries dissolved like sugar in warm tea. A Venetian traveller might find himself enchanted not just by exotic goods, but by the dark eyes and gentle smile of a local merchant's daughter. The nights along the Silk Road held a special magic. When the sun disappeared behind endless dunes, the desert transformed into a cathedral of stars. In this vast silence, travellers found themselves speaking more honestly than they ever had at home. Perhaps it was the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new distances, new farewells, or perhaps it was the way moonlight made every face seem softer, more vulnerable. Hearts opened like desert flowers after rain. Communication became an art form. When words failed, gestures spoke. When gestures weren't enough, gifts conveyed meaning. A small piece of jade, a silk scarf, a carefully written poem in a foreign script. These tokens carried messages deeper than language. They said, "I see you. I value this moment we've shared. I hope you'll remember me when the caravan moves on." In this way, love learned to speak in symbols, in colours, in the universal language of the heart. The caravanserai, these fortified inns, dotted the trade routes like islands of civilization in an ocean of wilderness. Within their walls, travellers found not just shelter and safety, but community. Musicians played instruments from distant lands, while storytellers wove tales in firelight. Merchants displayed their finest goods, and local artisans shared their crafts. In these temporary villages that assembled each night, hearts found each other across cultures and continents. Time moved differently on the Silk Road. Days blended into weeks, seasons into seasons. The urgency of city life dissolved into the patient rhythm of desert travel. In this slower world, relationships could deepen naturally. A shared meal became a ritual of friendship. A conversation by firelight could stretch until dawn. When time was measured in miles rather than minutes, hearts had space to discover what truly mattered. Love grew like oasis palms, slowly but with deep roots. Letters became precious cargo, more valuable than silk or spices to those who carried them. Written on thin paper or carved into small pieces of wood, these messages travelled thousands of miles in saddlebags and caravan chests. Some were formal business correspondence, others personal notes to family. But the most treasured were love letters, words of longing and devotion that crossed deserts and mountains to reach waiting hearts. Each letter a promise that distance could not break true connection. The Silk Road created its own customs of farewell. Knowing that departure was inevitable made each moment more precious. Lovers exchanged tokens that could travel. A lock of hair braided with coloured thread, a small mirror that would reflect their face wherever they went, a ring worn smooth by desert wind. These partings were not endings but transformations. Love learned to live in memory, in hope, in the faith that hearts once connected remain connected across any distance. As we begin this journey through the Silk Road of Hearts, imagine yourself among these ancient travellers. Feel the warm sand beneath your feet and the desert breeze on your face. Let your heart open to the possibility that love finds a way, even in the briefest encounters, even across the vastest distances. These stories remind us that human connection transcends all boundaries. Now, settle deeper and let these tales of romance and adventure carry you gently into peaceful dreams. Chapter 2. A Stranger in the Oasis. The caravan had travelled for days through shifting sands when the first green appeared on the horizon, palm trees swaying like gentle prayers against the endless blue. Here, where desert travellers have paused for centuries, water bubbles from ancient springs, and here, beneath the shade of date palms, strangers would meet, their lives intersecting for just one precious moment in time. The oasis bloomed like a jewel in the desert's heart. Terraced gardens stepped down toward crystal pools where fish moved like silver dreams. Merchants unpacked their silks and spices while children played between the palm fronds. This was more than a resting place. It was a crossroads where east met west, where stories flowed as freely as the spring water, and where two souls would discover something neither expected to find. Among the local people who called this oasis home lived Amara. Her days were spent tending the gardens that fed travellers, drawing water from wells her grandfather had dug. She knew the rhythm of caravans, the languages of commerce, the brief friendships formed over shared meals. But she had never looked up from her work to truly see a stranger's eyes, until that evening when the silk merchants arrived from Samarkand. As sunset painted the palms gold, the oasis came alive with ancient traditions. Local musicians brought out their ouds and flutes while travellers shared stories of distant cities. Dancers moved like desert winds, their scarves catching moonlight. This was the nightly ritual, hospitality flowing between host and guest, barriers dissolving in the warmth of firelight. And somewhere in this gentle chaos, two hearts began to notice each other. Darius watched the young woman as she moved gracefully between the cooking fires, serving flatbread and honey to the travellers. There was something in the way she paused to listen to each person's story, how she smiled at children's laughter when their eyes finally met across the flickering flames. Time seemed to pause. She offered him tea with hands that trembled slightly, and he accepted with a gentle nod of gratitude. They spoke first in the universal language of gestures, Amara pointing to the stars emerging overhead, Darius tracing patterns in the sand that showed the route he had travelled. Slowly, words began to bridge the gap between their worlds, his Persian mixed with her Arabic, creating something new and tender. Each shared phrase was a small gift, each smile a doorway opening between two very different lives. As the evening deepened, Darius told her of the great libraries of Baghdad, the silk workshops of Damascus, the mountain passes where eagles soared above the clouds. Amara shared stories of her oasis, the secret pools where desert roses bloomed, the ancient trees that whispered with the voices of travellers who had passed this way before. In their exchange of worlds, something beautiful was being born. When the traditional evening dance began, Amara hesitated before extending her hand to the stranger. Darius had never learned the steps of her people's dances, but something in her eyes made him brave. They moved awkwardly at first, then with growing grace. The other dancers smiled and made space for them. Under the desert stars, with music floating around them, their souls began to recognize each other. Later, as the celebrations quieted, They walked to the edge of the oasis where the desert began again. Here, sitting on sun-warmed rocks, they spoke of deeper things. Darius told her of his loneliness on the endless roads, how he sometimes wondered if he would ever find a place to call home. Amara confessed her dreams of seeing the world beyond the palm trees, of cities and mountains and seas. In the gentle night air, with only the whisper of palm fronds above them, they discovered how much they shared despite their different worlds. Both loved poetry. Both felt deeply moved by music. Both believed that kindness was the most precious gift one person could offer another. As they talked, the space between them seemed to shrink, their voices growing softer, more intimate, more trusting. Amara shared the legend of her oasis, how it had been blessed by a saint who declared that all who came here with peaceful hearts would find what they needed most. Darius listened, enchanted not just by the story, but by the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke. He began to understand that some needs could only be recognized when they were suddenly, miraculously fulfilled. When Darius took out his journal to show her sketches of his travels, Amara marveled at his drawings of distant cities and foreign faces. With trembling fingers, she traced the outline of a mountain he had climbed, a marketplace he had wandered. In return, she picked a small white flower that bloomed only in moonlight and pressed it between the pages. Their first gift to each other. As the night grew deeper and the oasis settled into peaceful sleep around them, neither wanted to break the spell that had woven itself between them. They sat closer now, shoulders almost touching, watching shooting stars trace silver paths across the darkness. Each meteor seemed to carry a wish. Each wish seemed to bind them closer to this moment that felt both eternal and heartbreakingly brief. Finally, Amara spoke the truth that hung between them like morning mist. Tomorrow, his caravan would leave. She would remain to tend her gardens and welcome the next group of travelers. But tonight had changed something in both of them. They had found in each other a recognition, a completion they had never known they were seeking. And now they would have to decide what that meant. Darius reached for her hand as the first pale light appeared on the eastern horizon. Their fingers intertwined like vines finding support in each other. No promises were spoken aloud, but both felt the weight of possibility settling around them like dawn light. What had begun as a chance encounter at a desert oasis was becoming something that might change the course of two lives forever. As the sun began to rise over the palm trees, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the spell of night slowly lifted. But what had been born between them in those precious hours remained. Darius would have to choose between the road he had always known and a love he had never imagined. While Amara faced the possibility of leaving everything familiar behind, their story was just beginning. Chapter 3. Letters Written in Moonlight. At the oasis, time moved differently than anywhere else along the Silk Road. Here, beneath date palms that whispered ancient secrets, travelers found moments to breathe, to rest, to remember who they were. Beneath the dust and endless sky, it was in these precious hours that hearts opened like night. Blooming flowers revealing truths that daylight kept hidden. The oasis welcomed all who arrived, merchants from distant lands, nomads following stars, pilgrims seeking sacred places, and among them, those whose hearts had been touched by unexpected love. Each carried within them the memory of eyes that sparkled by firelight, of hands that brushed theirs while sharing bread, of voices that spoke their names like prayers. Now, surrounded by palm trees and clear water, they found the courage to write. As evening settled over the oasis, the merchants secured their goods and the camels rested their weary legs. Cooking fires sparked to life, filling the air with the scent of spices and roasted grain. But some travelers moved apart from the communal warmth, seeking solitude beneath the emerging stars. They carried with them precious paper, carefully protected during long desert crossings. Tonight, these blank pages would hold their deepest longings. Amira sat beneath a flowering almond tree, her fingers trembling as she unfolded a sheet of silk paper. She had carried it from Damascus, saving it for something important. Now, with moonlight filtering through the leaves, she knew this was the moment. Her beloved Hassan was 3 cities behind her. yet his smile lived in every shadow. Every gentle breeze carried the echo of his laughter. She dipped her reed pen in ink. The first words came slowly. "My dearest heart," then faster, as if a dam had broken. Amira wrote of the way Hassan's eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his hands were gentle yet strong as they helped her onto her camel, how he sang under his breath while mending harnesses. She wrote of mornings when she woke, hoping to see his face among the travellers, of evenings when his absence felt like a physical ache. Nearby, beneath a date palm heavy with fruit, Kamal wrote his own letter. His beloved Yasmin waited in a garden in Bukhara, tending roses that bloomed like her cheeks. He had promised to return before winter. Now, halfway across the desert, that promise felt both sacred and impossible. The trade routes called him farther east, but his heart pulled him back to her arms. In elegant script, he poured out his dilemma. The moon climbed higher, casting silver light across the oasis. Its glow transformed the simple camp into something magical. Palm fronds became silver feathers. The small spring reflected stars like scattered diamonds, and in this enchanted space, love letters took shape, each word carefully chosen, each line a bridge across impossible distances. These travellers understood that love, like water in the desert, was precious beyond measure. Chen sat cross-legged on his travelling carpet, writing to Li Mei in characters that flowed like water. She worked in her father's silk shop in Kashgar, her fingers nimble with delicate threads. He described the colours he had seen, sunsets that painted the sky like her embroidery, morning light that reminded him of her gentle laughter. He folded origami cranes from spare paper, each one carrying a wish for their reunion. The letters spoke of small things that felt enormous. The way someone said good morning, how they shared their water without being asked, the sound of their footsteps on sand. These details, so ordinary during the day, became precious gems in moonlight. Each traveller discovered that love lived not in grand gestures, but in moments so brief they might have been dreams, yet persistent as the stars above. Some letters would never reach their destinations. The desert was vast and unpredictable. Caravans changed routes, cities fell to conquerors, people moved like leaves on the wind, yet the writers pressed on, because the act of writing was itself a form of love. Each letter a prayer sent into the universe, each word a testament that what they felt was real, worthy of preservation, deserving of hope. As midnight approached, the oasis grew quieter. Even the palm leaves stilled their rustling. In this profound silence, pens scratched against paper like whispered confessions. Fatima wrote to her beloved in Samarkand, describing how the stars looked different now, how she counted them each night and wondered if he saw the same constellations, if distance could shrink to nothing through shared sky, through synchronized breathing under the same moon. The letters revealed the true geography of the heart. Borders meant nothing. Language barriers dissolved. Cultural differences became interesting, rather than divisive. Under moonlight, a Persian merchant wrote to his Chinese beloved, mixing scripts and symbols, creating a new language born entirely of love. These pages held conversations between souls, discussions that transcended every boundary except the honest beating of two hearts, separated by miles, united by moonbeams. Some travellers wrote multiple letters, one for each stop along their route, like breadcrumbs leading back to love. They folded these carefully, placing them in silk pouches close to their hearts. Others wrote one long letter, adding to it each night, creating scrolls of longing that grew like prayers, accumulating weight and meaning with every mile, every sunset, every moment of solitude. When memory became almost unbearable, the ink dried slowly in the desert air, sealing promises and dreams onto paper. Some letters were stained with tears, others perfumed with jasmine or rose oil carried in tiny vials. A few were decorated with pressed flowers found along the route. Each letter became an artifact, evidence that love had passed this way, that hearts had opened like flowers at this oasis. under this particular arrangement of stars. Under this particular arrangement of stars. As dawn approached, the letter writers began to fold their pages. Some sealed them with wax pressed with ring impressions. Others wrapped them in cloth and tied them with coloured threads. These letters would travel in saddlebags, hidden in the folds of robes, tucked inside boots, each one a secret passenger on the next leg of the journey, carrying love forward, backward, across time itself. The oasis would remember this night, long after the travellers departed and new caravans arrived. The date palms held whispered secrets. The spring reflected moonlit tears of joy and sorrow. And somewhere in the sand, a few dropped pages flutter, fragments of love letters lost to time. Yet their words survive in the wind, in the rustle of leaves, in the eternal conversation between earth and sky, heart and heart. Chapter 4. Tokens of Affections. As dawn breaks across the desert, the time has come for farewells. Travellers gather their belongings, knowing their brief stay at this oasis must end. Yet love, once kindled, leaves traces that cannot simply be packed away. In these final moments, hearts heavy with departure, they search for ways to leave something precious behind, something to remember them by, something that speaks when words cannot. The merchant from Damascus reaches into his silk pouch, withdrawing a small carved wooden bird, no larger than his palm. He had carried it across countless miles, a gift from his daughter. Now he places it gently beside the well where he first met Amara, the wood still warm from his touch. A symbol of flight, of freedom, of love that soars beyond borders. His offering to this sacred place. Amara watches from her doorway, understanding without words. She disappears into her home, returning with a length of indigo fabric, soft as moonlight, dyed with precious pigments from distant lands. She drapes it carefully over the merchant's saddle, her fingers lingering on the silk. This cloth will travel with him, carrying her essence across the desert, a piece of the oasis wrapped around his journey. The young poet leaves behind verses written on papyrus, each line a memory of starlit conversations and shared laughter. He tucks the scrolls between the stones of the garden wall, where future travellers might discover these words. Poems about eyes that reflected desert moons and voices that sang like morning birds. His gift to this place is story itself. Love transformed into language that will outlive them all. Other tokens appear like morning flowers. A silver bracelet left beside the fountain, its surface engraved with constellations that guided lonely hearts. A small mirror wrapped in purple cloth, reflecting not just faces but moments of recognition, of seeing oneself loved. These offerings accumulate quietly, each one a whispered prayer, a tangible piece of connection left for this sacred ground to hold. But what the travellers carry with them proves even more precious than what they leave behind. The merchant's heart holds the memory of gentle hands that dressed his wounded arm. The poet carries verses not written on paper, but inscribed in his soul. Love songs that will emerge in distant cities, inspired by this brief encounter with grace, by the discovery that kindness still blooms in unexpected places. In his saddlebags, wrapped in protective leather, the merchant carries pressed flowers from the oasis garden, petals that will crumble to dust before he reaches home. Yet their fragrance will linger in the fabric, a scent that will transport him back to this moment, to conversations under palm fronds, to the taste of honey cakes shared at sunset. These flowers are time itself, carefully preserved. The poet's most treasured possession weighs nothing at all. It is the sound of Layla's voice speaking his name, the way she pronounced each syllable with such care, as if his name were a sacred word. This echo will accompany him through empty nights on the road, a private music that no robber can steal, no storm can damage. Love carried not in luggage, but in the heart's deep chambers. As the caravan prepares to depart, the women of the oasis gather. They bring small gifts for the travellers to carry. Packets of healing herbs tied with coloured thread, dried dates wrapped in soft leaves, blessing stones worn smooth by desert winds. These offerings transform the travellers into messengers, carriers of the oasis's love to distant shores, bridges between this sacred space and the wider world. The ancient keeper of the oasis understands this ritual. He has witnessed countless farewells, countless tokens exchanged. He knows that love creates its own geography, that hearts remember paths that maps cannot show. In his weathered hands he holds a final gift, a vial of water from the deepest spring. Blessed water that carries the essence of this place, of belonging, of home found in the most unlikely spaces. These departures are never truly endings. They are transformations, love changing form, but never disappearing. The tokens left behind become part of the oasis's story. Future travelers will find them, will wonder about the hands that placed them there, will add their own offerings to the collection, creating an invisible museum of hearts, a sacred archive of human connection preserved in this timeless place. Miles from the oasis, the travelers will unpack their belongings, discovering small gifts they did not know were placed. A jasmine blossom tucked between clothes, a tiny carved fish hidden in a grain sack. These surprise tokens will bring sudden tears, unexpected joy, proof that love works in mysterious ways, that hearts know how to give even when minds are distracted by farewell. In future years, when the merchant tells stories of his travels, he will speak of many cities, many wonders, but his voice will grow soft when he mentions the oasis. When he shows the indigo cloth now faded, but still precious, listeners will see the change in his eyes, will understand that some journeys transform not just location, but the very essence of who we are, that love is the ultimate destination. The poet's verses, inspired by his desert romance, will be sung in taverns and courtyards. Lovers in distant lands will hear these words and feel their own hearts quicken, without knowing the story behind the songs. The oasis continues to work its magic through poetry, through the ripple effect of one brief encounter, proving that authentic connection creates art that outlives the moment of its inspiration. Back at the oasis, the tokens remain. The wooden bird weathered by sandstorms but still perched by the well. The poem slowly fading but still readable. The mirror reflecting new faces, new stories. These objects become witnesses, silent guardians of love's history, reminding all who find them that this place is blessed, that it holds the power to transform strangers into beloved, despair into hope. Perhaps the greatest token of all is memory itself, the way hearts remember kindness long after faces fade, the way souls carry forward the warmth they have received. Travelers departing this oasis become carriers of its spirit, ambassadors of its grace, ensuring that its healing power spreads far beyond these waters, that love, once truly given, creates an eternal journey, a path with no end. Chapter 5. Lonely Nights Under Shimmering Stars. The desert stretched endlessly before the caravan, a sea of golden sand that seemed to swallow the horizon. As darkness fell, the travelers made camp beneath a canopy of stars so bright they cast shadows on the dunes. In this vast emptiness, each person felt the weight of solitude, yet within their hearts they carried treasures more precious than any silk or spice. The camels settled into rest, their bells silent now after the long day's journey. Fires flickered in small circles of warmth, casting dancing shadows across weathered faces. One by one, the travelers reached into their belongings, not for food or water, but for something far more sustaining. Letters wrapped in silk, small tokens tied with ribbon. These were the lifelines that connected their hearts across impossible distances. Malik unfolded a piece of parchment, its edges worn soft from countless readings. The words were in Arabic, written by delicate hands in Damascus. Even in the flickering firelight, he could see her face in every curve of the letters. She had pressed a jasmine flower between the pages, now dried and fragile, but still carrying the memory of her garden, of stolen moments beneath the olive trees. Chen held a jade pendant, no larger than his thumb. It was warm from resting against his chest throughout the long day's ride. She had carved her initials into the smooth stone before placing it in his palm. Their fingers had lingered together in that moment, neither wanting to let go. Now, thousands of miles separated them, yet the pendant made her feel present, like she was traveling beside him through the desert night. The mountain passes had been treacherous, winding through narrow ledges where one misstep meant certain death. But tonight, camped in a sheltered valley, the dangers seemed distant. Isabella traced the outline of a silver locket, inside which rested a miniature portrait, painted with impossible detail. It captured not just a face, but a soul. The artist in Venice had worked for weeks to perfect each brushstroke. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, the same constellations that had guided lovers across centuries of separation. Each traveller looked up and wondered if somewhere, in a distant city or village, another person gazed at these same points of light. The stars became messengers, carrying unspoken words across the darkness, connecting hearts that beat in rhythm despite the miles between them. Hassan pulled out a small vial of perfume, its crystal surface catching the starlight. Inside, the scent of roses from Isfahan. She had made it herself, blending petals with oils until the fragrance captured the essence of their garden meetings. When he removed the stopper, the desert air filled with memories, her laughter echoing through the rose arbor, promises whispered in the language of flowers. The night deepened, and the fire burned lower. Conversations grew softer, more intimate. Each traveller retreated into private worlds of memory and longing. The desert's silence seemed to amplify every heartbeat, every whispered prayer. In this vastness, human connections felt both impossibly fragile and eternally strong. Love letters became sacred texts, tokens transformed into holy relics, each memory a candle against the darkness. Maria unbraided a ribbon from her hair. Azure blue like the Mediterranean waters, he had tied it there during their last dance in Barcelona. The silk still held the faintest trace of his cologne. She closed her eyes and could feel his hands in her hair again, hear the music drifting from the tavern windows, taste the salt air that carried their promises. The ribbon was her anchor to that perfect evening. The caravan guards walked their perimeter, but the real dangers tonight were not bandits or wild animals. They were the aching spaces between heartbeats, the silence where beloved voices should be, the empty air where gentle hands should rest. Yet in their vulnerability, the travellers found unexpected strength. Love had not weakened them. It had given them courage to cross impossible distances, to risk everything for connection. Ahmad unrolled a small carpet, its patterns telling stories in thread and dye. She had woven it during their engagement, working by candlelight after her household duties were done. Each knot was a prayer, each colour a memory. The carpet was meant for their wedding chamber, but instead it accompanied him on this endless journey, under his hands. The wool still felt warm with her devotion. The desert wind carried scents and sounds from distant places. Sometimes the travellers swore they could smell home, bread baking in familiar ovens, flowers blooming in remembered gardens. These phantom fragrances brought both comfort and sorrow. They were reminders of all they had left behind, yet also proof that love transcends physical boundaries, that hearts can touch across any distance when the connection is true. Fatima held a collection of dried flower petals in a silk pouch, lavender from the hills of Provence, where they had picnicked on summer afternoons. Each petal was a captured moment, his voice reading poetry while she wove flower crowns, promises made under ancient oak trees. The petals crumbled at her touch, but their essence remained, like love itself, fragile yet enduring, beautiful in its impermanence. One by one, the travellers drifted towards sleep, but not before pressing their treasures close to their hearts. Letters tucked beneath pillows, tokens worn against skin. In dreams, distance collapsed. Lovers reunited in impossible landscapes where desert met forest, where mountains touched the sea. Sleep became a sanctuary, where separation held no power, where every goodbye became hello again, where every goodbye became hello again, where love conquered geography. The stars continued their silent vigil as the camp settled into quiet rest. But even in slumber, hands clutched precious reminders. Hearts beat in rhythm with distant hearts. The Silk Road stretched behind and ahead, endless and unforgiving. Yet it had also become something unexpected. A pathway for souls to find each other. A bridge between worlds that seemed impossibly far apart. Love had transformed the journey into pilgrimage. Dawn would come soon, bringing another day of dust and heat and endless miles. The caravan would rise, pack their precious belongings, and continue eastward. But something had shifted in the night. Loneliness had been transformed by memory. Distance had been conquered by devotion. Each traveller now carried not just letters and tokens, but renewed faith that love endures, that separation is temporary, that somewhere ahead reunion waits. Chapter 6: Stories Weaved in Silk. The caravan moves deeper into lands where silk flows like rivers of moonlight. Here, every thread tells a story, every pattern holds a memory. The merchants speak of markets ahead where cultures blend like colours on a loom, where hearts like silk fibres become intertwined in ways that time cannot unravel. The journey continues. In these ancient workshops, skilled hands move with practiced grace. Silkworms spin their cocoons while lovers whisper promises. The process is slow, meditative, much like the formation of deep connections. One thread at a time, relationships are built, strengthened by patience, made luminous by care. The silk masters know this secret, that beauty emerges only through gentle, deliberate attention. A young weaver named Amara tends to her loom as dawn breaks. Her fingers dance across the threads, while her heart dances with memories. Last night, a travelling musician played beneath her window. His melodies still echo in her mind. She weaves these notes into silk, creating patterns that speak of longing, of music that bridges the space between strangers. The musician, Hassan, carries more than instruments in his pack. He carries letters written on silk scarves, messages from lovers separated by mountain ranges and desert sands. Each performance becomes a form of mail delivery. His songs carry emotions across impossible distances, connecting hearts that beat under different stars, but share the same dreams of reunion. Amara embroiders a silk handkerchief with golden threads. She has no words for Hassan in his language, but the needle speaks fluently, creating patterns of birds in flight, symbols of freedom and return. When she gifts this to him, their eyes meet. Understanding flows between them like silk through gentle fingers. Some conversations need no words at all. Hassan must leave with the merchant caravan, but first he teaches Amara a simple melody. She hums it while she works, and he carries the sound in his memory. Miles apart, they share the same song, the same rhythm, their connection preserved in musical threads that cannot be severed by distance or time. Love finds its own language. In the marketplace, silk scarves flutter like prayers in the wind. Each one carries the hopes of its creator. Merchants display fabrics from distant lands, colours that speak of foreign sunsets, textures that whisper of unfamiliar rains. Travellers pause, running silk through their fingers, feeling the stories woven into every strand, choosing pieces to carry home. An elderly silk trader reveals his secret. Behind his stall, he keeps a collection of love letters, written on silk. They arrived with caravans from across the known world, some seeking lost lovers, others sharing news of marriages, births, partings. He has become the keeper of countless romantic stories, each thread connecting distant hearts. A young couple prepares for separation. She, bound to her family's silk business. He, called to trade in faraway cities. They create a ritual of connection, cutting a single silk scarf in half, each keeping one piece, promising that distance will never truly divide them. Their love remains whole, even when they cannot be. The caravan rests beside an oasis. Tents of silk shelter dreams beneath star-filled skies. Inside, travellers share stories of loves left behind, loves discovered along the way, loves hoped for in cities yet to come. The silk walls seem to absorb these whispered confidences, becoming repositories of the human heart's endless capacity for connection. A master dyer reveals the secret of silk colours. Red from madder root speaks of passion, blue from indigo, whispers of loyalty. Yellow from saffron glows with joy. Each shade carries emotional meaning. When lovers exchange silk gifts, they are speaking in a language older than words, communicating through color what hearts cannot always say aloud. The silk roads create more than trade routes. They weave networks of human connection. Families separated by commerce maintain bonds through silk messages. Lovers chronicle their devotion in embroidered diaries. Even strangers become friends through the sharing of silk-wrapped gifts. The threads connect not just cities, but souls across vast expanses of earth and time. In temple courtyards, monks tend silkworms with meditation. Like attention, they speak of the creature's transformation, from earthbound caterpillar to winged beauty, much like the transformation of the human heart through love. The cocoon becomes a metaphor. Love requires patience, protection, the willingness to emerge changed, renewed, ready to fly toward new possibilities. A silk banner waves in evening wind, painted with portraits of separated lovers. Their images face each other across the fabric, symbolic of hearts that remain connected despite physical distance. The banner travels with the caravan, carrying their story to distant lands. Love becomes legend. Legend becomes eternal, preserved in silk that outlasts the lovers themselves. As night falls over the silk markets, lanterns cast gentle light on flowing fabrics. The day's transactions are complete, but the stories woven into each piece continue their journeys, toward lovers who wait, toward celebrations that await, toward memories yet to be made. Silk carries more than beauty. It carries the dreams of every heart it touches. The caravan prepares to move deeper into unknown territories. Silk-wrapped treasures secured, stories collected, hearts enriched by connections made along the way. Each mile of road reveals new possibilities for love, new ways that hearts can intertwine like silk threads. The journey continues, and with it, the eternal dance of human connection across cultures and time. Chapter 7. Echoes of the Heart. As the caravan settled for another night, something beautiful began to unfold. Travelers reached into their worn leather pouches, pulling out precious letters from distant homelands. These weren't just words on parchment. They were pieces of souls, carried across mountains and deserts. Tonight, strangers would become storytellers, sharing the deepest chambers of their hearts. Amira watched as merchants from Constantinople gathered around the fire. Their weathered hands unfolded letters written in languages she'd never seen. Yet somehow, the emotion needed no translation. One man's voice trembled as he read about his daughter's first steps. Another shared news of his mother's garden blooming after years of drought. Each word carried the weight of distance. The local villagers drew closer, drawn by the music of foreign tongues. Children peeked from behind their mothers' robes as stories of far-off lands painted pictures in the desert air. A silk merchant showed them pressed flowers from his wife's garden. Another displayed a small jade figurine, carved by his son's tiny fingers. These tokens became bridges across impossible distances. Hassan found himself translating between hearts. His voice became a gentle river carrying meaning from one shore to another. When the Venetian trader spoke of canals reflecting moonlight, Hassan painted the scene in Arabic. When Amira described their desert blooms, he wove her words into Persian silk. Language barriers dissolved like sugar in warm tea. As the evening deepened, something magical occurred. The travelers began sharing not just their own letters, but stories collected along their journeys. Tales of lovers separated by war, reunited by fate, of promises kept across decades, of love letters buried in bottle caps, discovered by strangers who became soulmates. Each story added another star to their constellation of connection. Amira found her voice among the chorus. She spoke of her grandmother's love letters, written during the Great Drought, how her grandfather would ride 3 days to deliver each message, how their words kept hope alive when the earth seemed to forget how to bloom. The travelers listened with hearts wide open, adding her story to their collection. The merchants began sharing letters they'd carried for others. Messages from mothers to daughters, from lovers to beloveds, from children to fathers working distant trade routes. Each letter was a sacred trust. Some had been carried for months, waiting for the right recipient. Tonight, under these infinite stars, some found their destination at last. A young trader from Kashmir unwrapped a bundle of letters tied with golden thread. They were love poems, he explained, written by couples in his village for their distant beloveds. He'd promised to carry them to the ends of the earth. As he read each one aloud, the words transformed into butterflies of longing, dancing in the firelight. The village elder, drawn by the gentle voices, approached with his own treasure, a leather pouch containing stories passed down through generations, tales of travellers who'd stopped at this very oasis, who'd shared their hearts and left pieces of their souls behind. Tonight, he said, new stories would be born. New echoes would begin their journey through time. As midnight approached, the travellers began writing new letters, inspired by the stories they'd heard. They put quill to parchment. Some wrote to lovers left behind, others to family members they missed. But many wrote to the new friends sitting beside them, letters of gratitude for this moment of pure human connection beneath the desert stars. Amira watched Hassan write with careful precision. His letter wasn't destined for a distant land, but for her. When he folded the parchment and placed it in her hands, she understood that some messages don't need to travel far to bridge the greatest distances. Sometimes the most important words are meant for the heart sitting right beside you. The children of the village, no longer hiding, began collecting discarded flower petals and small stones. They were creating their own letters, they explained, messages for the wind to carry to children in other lands. Their innocent gestures reminded the adults that love needs no alphabet, no formal language. Sometimes a single flower says everything that needs to be said. As dawn painted the horizon in shades of rose and gold, the travellers prepared for departure. But something had changed. They weren't the same people who'd arrived the evening before. They carried new stories now, new connections, new echoes of hearts that had touched theirs. The village, too, would never be quite the same again. The merchants carefully packed their letters alongside their silken spices, but now they carried something more precious. The memory of last night's sharing, the warmth of unexpected friendships, the knowledge that in this vast world, hearts beat with the same rhythm everywhere. These memories would sustain them through many lonely desert nights ahead. Years later, other travellers would stop at this oasis. The villagers would tell them about the night when strangers became family, about letters that crossed oceans and stories that bridged cultures, about how love echoes through time, carried from heart to heart by those brave enough to share their deepest truths with strangers under starlit skies. And so the echoes began their eternal journey, carried in the memories of merchants heading to distant markets, woven into the bedtime stories told to village children, whispered in the prayers of grandmothers. Love, once shared, never truly ends. It ripples outward like stones thrown into still water, creating circles that expand forever, touching shores we'll never see. Chapter 8. Letters Across the Desert. The morning sun cast long shadows across the oasis when the messenger arrived, dust still clinging to his robes from the long journey through shifting sands. In his weathered hands, he carried something precious, a letter sealed with wax that had travelled countless miles. The woman by the well looked up from her daily tasks, recognizing immediately the significance of what was about to unfold. She accepted the letter with trembling fingers, her heart already knowing who had sent it across the endless desert. The parchment felt warm against her palm, as if it still held the heat of distant sands where he now wandered. Breaking the seal carefully, she unfolded pages that contained his thoughts, his longing, his memories of their brief but profound encounter beneath the stars of her oasis home. His words flowed like water in drought, describing landscapes she had never seen but could now imagine through his eyes. Mountains crowned with snow, cities filled with spices and silk, yet in every line he returned to that night, when their paths crossed at the crossroads of fate, when two strangers found connection deeper than the wells that sustained her desert home, deeper than the routes he travelled. She remembered him clearly now. The traveller who had appeared at sunset. His caravan seeking rest and water. How he had lingered by the fire while others slept, sharing stories of distant lands and forgotten peoples. His voice gentle against the desert wind. His eyes reflecting starlight. Neither of them knowing then that their conversation would echo across the months that followed, like ripples in still water. In the letter, he wrote of how her image had sustained him through sandstorms, how her laughter had become his compass when the way seemed lost. He described her grace in drawing water, the kindness in her eyes when she offered bread to hungry travellers, details she had forgotten about herself, yet preserved in his memory like precious gems carried across continents. His words painted pictures of their final morning together, when dawn arrived too soon, and duty called him back to the road. How he had wanted to speak, but found himself speechless, watching her silhouette against the rising sun, knowing he might never see her again, yet hoping somehow that distance could not diminish what had begun to bloom between them, like desert flowers after rare rain. She folded the letter carefully, pressing it against her heart, feeling the ache of recognition and loss intertwined. He was out there somewhere, perhaps writing more letters by lamplight in some distant caravanserai, while she remained tethered to this oasis, this sanctuary that had always been her world, now suddenly feeling both blessed and confined by its familiar boundaries and ancient rhythms. The desert wind whispered through palm fronds as she walked to their meeting place, the same spot where they had sat and talked until the stars wheeled overhead, where she had first glimpsed the wanderer's soul beneath his traveller's garb, now empty, except for memories, and the echo of promises neither had dared to speak aloud, promises that lived now only in letters and dreams. Days passed before she found the courage to write her reply. How could mere words capture the way her world had shifted since his letter arrived? How the oasis seemed smaller now, yet also more precious. She wrote of daily rituals made meaningful by his absence, of sunrise prayers that now included thoughts of his safe passage, of water drawn with reverence for all who thirst. She told him of desert nights when she imagined his caravan beneath the same moon, how she traced constellations he had shown her, connecting stars like dots on an invisible map leading to wherever he now travelled. Her words flowed like water over sand, honest and clear, carrying emotions she had never learned to name, but understood with the wisdom of her desert-born heart. In her letter, she described the changing seasons at the oasis, how winter brought different birds, how spring renewed the date palms, how summer heat intensified but never matched the warmth she felt when remembering their conversations. She wrote of other travellers who came and went, how she listened for his voice among strangers, how none carried themselves with his particular grace and gentleness. She sealed her response with beeswax from her father's hives, adding pressed flowers from the oasis gardens, small tokens to carry her presence across the vast distances between them. Then entrusted it to another merchant caravan heading east, knowing it would follow uncertain routes, through sandstorms and political borders, carrying her heart's message toward an unknown destination and an uncertain future. Months passed without word. She tended her duties with patient grace, drawing water for travellers, sharing meals with strangers, listening to tales of distant cities, always hoping for news of him, of his safe arrival somewhere, of his continued journey, yet finding peace in the routine of giving, in being the constant star around which others wandering orbited, however briefly. Then another letter arrived, thicker this time, filled with pressed leaves from foreign gardens, descriptions of bazaars and mountain passes, but most importantly, plans, dreams of return, of completing the circle that would bring him back to her oasis, to the woman who had become his true north, his reason for continuing the endless dance between staying and leaving that defined a traveller's life. She read his words of hope with tears and laughter, understanding now that some loves are not diminished by distance, but refined by it, purified like gold in fire. Their connection had transcended physical presence, becoming something ethereal yet more real than the shifting sands. A bond written in stars and letters, sustained by faith and the patient rhythm of desert time. As sunset painted the oasis in shades of gold and rose, she tucked his letters safely away, knowing that whether he returned or remained forever traveling, their love had already achieved something remarkable. It had transformed two strangers into kindred spirits, two separate hearts into one story, written across the endless pages of desert sky, eternal and unchanging as the stars themselves. Chapter 9. The Love That Transcends Borders. There exists a peculiar magic in the connections formed between strangers when a traveller's path crosses with a local's daily rhythm. These encounters, brief as desert rain, leave impressions that last lifetimes. Tonight, we explore the tender feelings that bloom between those who meet for mere moments, yet remember each other forever. Perhaps you've felt it yourself, that spark of recognition with someone whose language you barely share. The merchant's daughter who served you tea in a roadside inn, her smile lingering in memory long after the caravan moved on. Or the shepherd who pointed you toward water, his kindness becoming a compass for your heart. These moments transcend words. Along the Silk Road, such connections were woven into the very fabric of trade. Caravans would arrive dusty and weary, seeking shelter in oasis towns. Local families opened their doors, offering food, water, and human warmth. In these brief interludes between journeys, something deeper than commerce took root. Hearts opened like desert flowers after rain, blooming quickly, beautifully, beautifully. The feelings were mutual. As travelers brought stories from distant lands, locals found themselves dreaming of horizons beyond their daily world. A young woman in Samarkand might gaze at stars, wondering about the merchant who spoke of Constantinople's golden domes, while he, camped under those same stars, remembered her eyes reflecting lamplight in her father's courtyard. Language barriers became bridges of the heart. When words failed, hands spoke, a gentle touch while sharing bread, eyes meeting across cultural divides. These connections required no translation. The universal language of kindness, curiosity, and human warmth transcended every border drawn by kings or carved by mountains. Love needed no passport, no permission to bloom. Letters were written but rarely sent. Too dangerous, too uncertain were the roads. Instead, these feelings lived in memory. Travelers would carry the essence of their brief encounters like precious cargo, a pressed flower, a simple bracelet, a melody hummed while working. These became sacred keepsakes of connections that defied geography and time. Sometimes, against all odds, paths would cross again. A trader returning years later to find the innkeeper's son grown tall, or a local girl recognizing weathered hands that once helped her draw water from the well. These reunions were rare jewels along the endless trade routes, moments when time folded back on itself, when borders dissolved completely. More often, though, these loves remained as whispers on the wind, stories told around evening fires. A grandmother in Kashgar might speak of the gentle silk merchant who taught her daughter to read stars, while in distant Venice, an old trader would remember the voice that sang him to sleep during fever. These ephemeral loves taught profound lessons. They showed that human connection needs no foundation of shared history, no promise of tomorrow. Love could bloom in a single evening and sustain hearts for decades. It could cross deserts and mountains, survive in memory long after faces faded, becoming part of the traveller's map, guiding them home to themselves. The locals, too, were forever changed. A single conversation with a passing stranger might shift their entire perspective. Dreams of distant lands would take root. Some would eventually leave their homes, following trade routes toward new horizons, carrying within them the spark ignited by a traveller who had moved on seasons before. Children born from these brief encounters carried dual heritage in their souls. Half their hearts belonged to settled earth, half to wandering wind. They grew up with stories of distant fathers or mothers, learning that love could exist without possession, that connection could flourish without chains, that home was wherever hearts chose to rest. The gifts exchanged were never valuable by merchant standards. A wooden comb carved during lonely nights, a handful of seeds from a garden thousands of miles away, a song taught in broken words. Yet these simple tokens carried the weight of entire worlds, becoming family treasures passed down through generations. Modern travelers understand this ancient rhythm. The backpacker who falls in love with a small village, the business traveler touched by unexpected kindness in an airport, the tourist whose heart remains in a cafe where a stranger shared stories. Technology may have changed, but the human heart recognizes the same timeless melody. These loves ask nothing and give everything. They require no promises, no plans, no guarantees. They exist purely in the present moment, teaching us that the deepest connections often come without expectation, that beauty lies not in permanence, but in presence, in the courage to open our hearts to passing strangers. Perhaps this is love's greatest lesson, that it knows no borders because it recognizes no strangers. Every person we meet carries the potential for connection, for understanding, for the brief, shining moment when two souls recognize something familiar in each other, across all the distances that seem to divide us. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, remember, every stranger you've ever met was once someone's brief encounter, someone's cherished memory, someone's evidence that love transcends all borders, and that the human heart, wherever it travels, always finds its way home to connection, to kindness, to love that knows no boundaries. Chapter 10. A Journey's End and New Beginnings. The endless horizon that had called to them for months now shimmers with the promise of arrival. Dust-covered travelers slow their pace as familiar landmarks emerge from the desert haze. This caravan, bound together by shared nights under infinite stars, begins to understand that all journeys must eventually find their destination. And with that knowing comes both relief and gentle sorrow. The camels sense it first. Their steady rhythm changes as they catch scents of settled life ahead. Cooking fires, gardens, the permanence of stone walls and wooden doors. These creatures who have carried love letters and whispered promises across impossible distances now carry their riders toward the moment when wandering transforms into remembering, when movement becomes stillness, when the road finally leads home. In the final camp, beneath stars that have witnessed their entire journey, the travelers gather one last time. Hands reach for small treasures carefully preserved through sandstorms and scorching days. Silk scarves that still hold perfume from distant markets. Carved wooden tokens smooth from countless touches. Each memento a bridge between the life they're leaving and the settled existence that awaits. She unfolds a letter for the 100th time, the paper worn soft as cloth, ink faded but still legible, words written by lamplight in a merchant's tent while rain drummed against canvas walls. Promises made between strangers who became lovers for 7 nights. Now, as dawn approaches and paths diverge, these words become her most precious possession. Proof that love can bloom anywhere. He packs away the silver bracelet she pressed into his palm that final evening. It bears the intricate patterns of her homeland, each curve telling stories of mountains and rivers he will never see. But when he wears it in his new life, those stories will become his. Their brief romance expanding into something larger. Connection transcending geography. Love refusing the boundaries of time and distance. Dawn breaks over their last shared horizon, and with the light comes the gentle chaos of departure. Caravans splitting like rivers, finding different courses. Embraces that linger just a moment longer than friendship. Eyes meeting across the growing distance between travelers who know they may never see each other again, yet carry pieces of each other's hearts forward into whatever comes next. The merchant chooses a quiet city, where spices from distant lands will remind him of desert nights. He opens a small shop with windows that face west, toward the setting sun and the memories that live there. Customers notice how gently he handles silk, how his fingers trace patterns that speak of places far away, and sometimes they catch him smiling at nothing they can see. She settles in a mountain village where the air is thin and clean, where terraced gardens climb toward clouds, and every morning brings the sound of temple bells. In her small house, she creates a space for remembering, a shelf where treasures from the road find new purpose, transforming her simple rooms into a museum of moments when love was possible. Years pass like seasons. The sharp edges of memory soften into something warmer. The ache of separation transforms into gratitude for having loved at all. In their settled lives, these former wanderers discover that home is not a place you find, but something you carry, built from connections made under foreign stars, constructed from the courage to open your heart to strangers. The silk scarf becomes a tablecloth for special occasions. The carved token finds its place on a windowsill, where morning light illuminates its ancient symbols. Love letters, carefully preserved, emerge on quiet afternoons when rain falls and memory calls. These souvenirs of the heart transform ordinary moments into something sacred, proof that beauty travels and love endures transformation. In their new communities, they become the ones with stories, voices that carry the wisdom of distant places and temporary love. Children gather to hear tales of desert nights and oasis dreams. And in the telling, those brief romances bloom again, becoming legend, teaching young hearts that connection can happen anywhere, that love recognizes no borders or boundaries. Sometimes, in the marketplace, a particular spice will stop them completely, its scent carrying them back to a tent where someone waited with warm bread and gentle hands. Or a song drifting from an open window will sound like laughter they once shared under stars. These moments remind them that settling down doesn't mean forgetting. It means creating space for memories to live. The merchant marries a baker's daughter who smells of wheat and honey, but on their wedding night, he shows her the silver bracelet and tells its story. She listens with wonder, understanding that his heart is large enough for both past love and present joy, that the capacity to love grows with practice, that his desert romance makes him more worthy of her trust. She becomes a teacher, her classroom filled with maps of places she has known, pointing to distant cities where she once loved and was loved. Her students learn geography through the lens of human connection, understanding that the world is not empty space between points, but a web of relationships waiting to be discovered, of hearts ready to recognize each other. And when they are old, these former travelers understand the greatest truth of all, that every love story is also a travel story, every connection a journey undertaken, whether across vast deserts or simply across a room where strangers become friends. The distance matters less than the courage to bridge it, the willingness to let someone else change the direction of your heart. The Silk Road continues. New caravans form and dissolve. New lovers find each other beneath the same infinite stars. And somewhere, in quiet homes built from wandering dreams, old travelers smile and remember, their souvenirs of love glowing softly in the lamplight, proof that some journeys never truly end. They simply transform into stories that teach us how to begin again. And again. Chapter 11. Silent Echoes. The caravan had long since reached its destination, yet the travellers found themselves returning again and again to the treasures they carried, not silk or spices, but something far more precious, letters folded with trembling hands, tokens wrapped in memory, each one a bridge across the vast distances that now separated hearts that once beat beneath the same desert stars. In quiet moments, when the bustle of their new lives grew still, they would reach for these sacred keepsakes. A merchant in Constantinople would unfold a letter written in Persian script. The ink faded, but the words still burning bright. "Your eyes hold the desert sunrise," it read. And suddenly, he was there again, in that moonlit oasis where time had stopped. She kept the small brass bell he had given her, hanging it by her window where the morning breeze could stir its gentle song. Each soft chime transported her back to the bazaar in Samarkand, where his laughter had mingled with the sound of distant caravans. The bell had travelled thousands of miles, yet it still carried the music of that moment when their fingers first touched. The silk scarf retained its perfume, even after months of travel, jasmine and sandalwood, the scents of her garden in Damascus. He would hold it close and remember her voice as she taught him words in Arabic, her hand guiding his across the page. Habibi, she had whispered, beloved, a word that needed no translation, speaking directly to the heart. Distance, they discovered, had a weight all its own. It pressed against their chests as they counted the miles between then and now, between here and there. Yet somehow, these letters made the impossible seem possible. Words written by candlelight in a tent could travel across continents, carrying love as surely as any caravan carried precious cargo. The young scholar from Baghdad would read her letters by the light of different moons, in Venice, in Prague, in distant cities whose names she had never heard. Yet her words found him everywhere. I watch the same stars you see, she had written, and he would look up at the night sky, knowing that somewhere she was doing the same. Time moves differently in the desert, one letter began. Here, beneath these endless stars, I feel as though we had a lifetime together, not just those few precious days. The words were worn from countless readings, the paper soft as silk from being folded and unfolded by hands that ached to hold the writer once more, love preserved in ink and memory. Each token held its own story. The carved wooden horse from a craftsman in Kashgar, its surface smooth from anxious fingers, the silver bracelet that still held grains of desert sand in its intricate patterns, the dried flower pressed between pages of poetry. Its colour faded, but its meaning eternal. These objects became altars to moments that could never return. In times of loneliness, these treasures sustained them like water in the desert. A merchant's daughter in Venice would touch the turquoise pendant and feel the warmth of Tashkent's summer sun. A poet in Cairo would smell the lavender sachets and hear again the mountain streams of distant Persia. Love had taught them to carry home within their hearts. They had learned love's greatest paradox, how the briefest encounters could leave the deepest marks, how a single week beneath the desert sky could outweigh years of ordinary days. Their hearts had been archaeologists, discovering that sometimes the most profound connections happen not over lifetimes, but in the space between one sunset and the next, sunrise. Under those same stars that had witnessed their first shy glances, new travellers now made camp. The desert held these stories in its silence, each grain of sand a keeper of whispered promises. And perhaps somewhere in the vastness, two souls still searched the horizon, hoping for a familiar silhouette against the golden dunes of memory. The letters revealed how universal the language of longing truly was. Whether written in Arabic, Persian, or Chinese, the words sang the same song. I dream of your smile. The sunrise reminds me of your laughter. Distance cannot diminish what we shared. Love, it seemed, spoke in a tongue that every heart understood, regardless of the lips that gave it voice. They had communicated through more than words, through the language of shared silence as they watched caravans disappear into the morning mist, through the gentle touch of healing hands tending to travel, worn feet, through songs hummed in the darkness, melodies that needed no translation because they spoke directly to the soul's deepest understanding. Years would pass, and still these memories remained vivid as yesterday's dreams. The way moonlight had painted silver paths across sand dunes, how her laugh had echoed off canyon walls, the weight of his hand in hers as they walked between sleeping camels, brief encounters that had somehow rewoven the very fabric of who they were. These fleeting romances had taught them something profound about love itself, that it wasn't measured in years but in depth, that a heart could be forever changed by someone whose name it whispered for only a season, that true love left gifts, that time could never steal, wisdom wrapped in wonder, carried forward into every tomorrow. And so they carried these silent echoes wherever life led them, in the rustle of silk that reminded them of desert winds, in the scent of spices that brought back market mornings, in the sight of distant mountains that promised other journeys, other possibilities. Love had made them collectors of beauty, forever grateful for hearts that had dared to open beneath foreign stars. Chapter 12. A tale told in the sands. Centuries have passed since the last caravans crossed these ancient routes, yet the stories remain, whispered by desert winds and preserved in the memory of stars. The letters, the tokens, the promises made beneath silk tent canopies, they have become something more than mere artifacts. They have become legend, woven into the very fabric of folklore. In the bazaars of Samarkand, storytellers still speak of the merchant who carried 7 letters across 3 kingdoms, each one written by a different lover, each one promising to wait. The children gather close as the tale unfolds, eyes wide with wonder at the thought of love stretching across such impossible distances. These stories have outlived empires, outlived the very roads that birthed them. Archaeological expeditions have uncovered fragments of these ancient correspondences, buried in the sands, preserved by accident and time, letters written in languages long forgotten, sealed with wax that still bears the impression of desperate fingers. Each discovery reveals not just history, but the enduring nature of human longing. Proof that love once flourished in the most unlikely places. The jade bracelet found in a collapsed caravanserai, the silk scarf discovered wrapped around a traveller's journal. These tokens speak of promises made under starlight, of hands that touched briefly before being separated by duty and distance. Museum curators handle these artifacts with reverence, knowing they hold not just objects, but the essence of human connection across centuries. Local legends have grown around these discoveries. Tales of ghostly figures seen walking the old trade routes at twilight. Some say they are the spirits of lovers still searching for each other. Others believe they are guardians of the letters, ensuring that no message of love is ever truly lost. The nomads who still traverse these paths leave offerings, hoping their own loves will endure. In Kashmir, an old woman keeps a collection of pressed flowers, each one said to have been plucked by travelers centuries ago. She claims they never fade, never crumble, sustained by the love they once carried. Visitors come from distant lands to see these impossible blooms, drawn by stories of romance that transcends time, hoping to glimpse something eternal in their delicate petals. The scholars who study these artifacts speak of patterns, recurring symbols, similar phrases written in different hands, as if love itself had developed its own language along the Silk Road, a universal grammar of longing that crossed cultural boundaries. Hearts separated by geography, but united by the same fundamental human need to connect, to be remembered, to love and be loved. Modern travelers following these ancient routes report strange experiences, dreams of caravans that vanish at sunrise, the scent of jasmine carried on desert winds, voices calling names in languages they don't understand. Perhaps the very landscape holds these memories. Perhaps love, once expressed with such intensity, leaves traces that echo through time like ripples on an endless sea. The letters themselves tell us stories beyond their words. The paper made from mulberry bark, the ink mixed with tears, some written hurriedly by campfire light, others carefully composed over days of travel, each one a masterpiece of longing. The handwriting growing shakier as hope faded, steadier when love was renewed. These documents are maps of the human heart. In remote mountain villages, elders still recite the poetry of parting, verses supposedly composed by those ancient lovers. Each generation adds new stanzas, new interpretations. The poems have evolved, grown, adapted, yet their core remains unchanged. The universal experience of love found and lost along roads that led everywhere and nowhere. Words that bridge centuries like stepping stones across time. The tokens found their way into local traditions. Brides still carry small silk pouches filled with desert sand, believing it will protect their marriages from the separation that distance brings. Merchants touch jade amulets before embarking on long journeys. Children wear silver bells that chime like those once carried by caravans. These customs keep the spirits of ancient lovers alive. Some letters were never delivered, found clutched in the hands of travelers who died on remote mountain passes. Yet even these fulfilled their purpose, discovered years later by other wanderers who were moved to continue their own journeys, to seek their own connections, to write their own letters to distant loves. The cycle continues, unbroken across generations. The folklore speaks of a great library hidden somewhere in the Taklamakan desert, where every letter ever written along the Silk Road is preserved, waiting for the lovers to return and claim them. Nomads report glimpsing its golden dome at sunset, but it vanishes when approached. Perhaps some stories are meant to remain just beyond reach, beautiful in their mystery. Modern archaeologists continue to uncover evidence of these ancient romances. Carbon dating confirms what hearts always knew. Love is timeless. The human need for connection transcends era, culture, and geography. These letters and tokens are not merely historical artifacts. They are proof that across all the centuries and distances, the heart's essential language remains unchanged. Love calls to love. Today, as you listen to these tales, you become part of their continuation. These stories live because they are told, remembered, shared. Each time we speak of love that endures despite separation, we honor those ancient travelers who dared to love across impossible distances. Their courage echoes in every modern romance. Their hope lives on in every letter written, every message sent. The sands of the Silk Road continue to shift, revealing and concealing treasures in their endless dance. But the stories remain constant, written not just on paper or carved in jade, but inscribed in the eternal record of human love. These tales remind us that connection transcends time, that somewhere, always, hearts are reaching across distance, searching for their perfect echo in another soul. Chapter 13. Memoirs of the Heart. As we reach the end of our journey along these ancient routes, we pause to reflect, not just on the stories we've heard, but on something deeper. The universal language of human emotion that transcends all borders and centuries. Each tale we've shared carries within it the essence of what connects us all. Love, longing, hope, and the courage to open our hearts to strangers. Think of all the random encounters that have shaped your own story. A conversation with a stranger on a train, a shared glance across a crowded marketplace, a moment of kindness from someone whose name you never learned. These fleeting connections leave impressions that last lifetimes, just as they did for travelers along the Silk Road centuries ago, when human hearts first learned to recognize themselves in others. There's something profound about the way emotion travels, not just within our own hearts, but from person to person, generation to generation. The merchant who wrote love letters by lamplight, his feelings echo still in the letters we write today. The dancer who left tokens of affection, her gestures live on in every small gift exchanged between lovers. Emotion is the thread that weaves us all together. Emotion is the thread that weaves us all together. Perhaps this is what the ancient travelers understood, that every encounter holds potential, not just for trade or commerce, but for connection, for the kind of brief, beautiful moments that change us forever. They carried more than silk and spices across those desert highways. They carried pieces of their hearts, ready to share with anyone brave enough to receive them, and left with pieces of others in return. Consider the courage it took to love someone you might never see again, to pour your heart into a single night beneath unfamiliar stars. These travelers taught us that meaningful connections don't require permanence. Sometimes the most profound love stories are written in moments, in the space between hello and goodbye, in the tender pause before the caravan moves on toward the horizon. Every culture along the Silk Road had different words for love, different customs, different ways of expressing the heart's deepest longings. Yet when we look beneath the surface, when we listen to these stories with quiet attention, we hear the same emotions echoing across languages and centuries. The need to connect, to be seen, to be understood, to leave something beautiful behind. These feelings speak a universal language. To leave something beautiful language. There's wisdom in the way these ancient lovers approached impermanence. They didn't let the brevity of their time together diminish the depth of their feeling. Instead, they loved more intensely, more completely, because they knew each moment was precious. Each shared meal became a ceremony. Each whispered conversation became poetry. Each farewell became a sacred vow to remember, to cherish, to honor what had been a sacred vow to remember. The artifacts they left behind tell us so much, not just about their customs, but about their hearts. A jade bracelet passed from traveller to merchant. A silk scarf left on a pillow with a note in foreign script. A small carved bird, wings spread in flight. These weren't just gifts. They were promises. Ways of saying, "You mattered to me." Ways of ensuring their brief connection would outlive the desert winds. In our modern world, we often forget the power of these small gestures. We rush past moments that could become memories, overlook connections that could become treasures. But the Silk Road teaches us to slow down, to pay attention, to recognize that every person we meet carries stories worth hearing, hearts worth knowing, spirits worth celebrating, even if only for a single evening. Even if only for a single evening. What would it mean to approach our own encounters with such openness, such willingness to be moved by others? To see every stranger as a potential friend, every conversation as a chance for connection, every goodbye as an opportunity to leave something beautiful behind. The travellers knew that the greatest treasures aren't made of gold or silk. They're made of moments when hearts recognize each other. Sometimes the most lasting impressions come from the briefest encounters. A merchant's daughter who taught a traveller to write her name in her native script. A musician who played a song that reminded someone of home. A weaver who showed kindness to a stranger, far from family. These small acts of human tenderness ripple forward through time, creating waves of connection that reach us still. The desert has a way of stripping away everything non-essential, leaving only what matters most. And what mattered to these travellers, what they carried closest to their hearts, wasn't wealth or status. It was the memory of eyes that understood them, voices that welcomed them, hands that reached out in friendship. These are the true treasures of the Silk Road. Connections that transcend time and distance. As we reflect on these stories, we begin to understand something beautiful. That love isn't just about the relationships that last forever. It's also about the brief encounters that change us. The strangers who show us new ways of being. The moments of connection that remind us we're not alone in this vast world. Every heart we've touched along the way becomes part of our story. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson the Silk Road offers, that we are all travellers, all seekers, all carriers of stories and hearts full of longing. And when we meet others on this journey, whether for a moment or a lifetime, we have the opportunity to create something beautiful together, to leave each other a little less alone, a little more understood, a little more loved. The ancient roots are quiet now, but the emotions that once travelled these paths continue their journey in us. Every time we choose connection over isolation, kindness over indifference, openness over fear, we become part of this timeless caravan of hearts, carrying forward the tender legacy of all who dared to love across distances, across differences, across the brief span of human time. So let us remember, as we close this chapter of memoirs and reflections, that every encounter holds sacred potential, every heart we meet carries infinite worth, and every moment of connection, however brief, however unexpected, becomes part of the eternal story of human love, written across deserts and mountains, across time itself, in the universal language of the heart, forever and always. Chapter 14. The Silk Road of Hearts. An eternal journey. As our travels draw to a close, we find ourselves standing at the crossroads of memory and meaning. The desert winds carry whispers of every love story we've encountered. Each tale, a golden thread woven into the vast tapestry of human connection. The road stretches endlessly behind us, marked by footprints of those who dared to love. We began this journey following ancient trade routes, but we discovered something far more precious than silk or spices. We found the universal language of the heart, across continents and centuries, beneath different stars and speaking different tongues. Travellers have always sought the same thing: connection, understanding, the warmth of another soul, recognizing their own. The Silk Road was never just about commerce. It was about transformation. Every caravan that crossed those shifting sands carried more than goods. They carried dreams, hopes, and the endless human capacity for love. Merchants became storytellers, strangers became friends, and sometimes, in the magic of a single evening, two hearts would find their home in each other. Think of all the connections we've witnessed: the Chinese poet who left verses for her Persian lover, the Mongolian horseman who carved his beloved's name into leather, the Syrian merchant who learned Italian songs to serenade a Venetian maiden. Each story proves that love needs no translation. It speaks in glances, in gestures, in the silent understanding between souls. These travellers taught us that distance means nothing to a heart in love. Letters travelled for months across desert and mountain. Tokens of affection crossed borders without passports. Promises were kept by memory alone. And somehow, through the vast emptiness of separation, love found a way to bridge every gap, to cross every divide, to endure every test. Their stories echo in our modern world. The businessman texting his wife from Shanghai, the student writing emails from study abroad, the traveller sharing photos from distant lands. We are all descendants of those ancient wanderers, still seeking connection, still believing that somewhere out there, someone waits to understand the language of our heart. The desert winds that once carried love letters between continents still blow across our world today. Now they carry our wishes through fiber optic cables, through satellite signals, through the invisible threads that connect every beating heart. The medium changes, but the message remains eternal. I love you. I remember you. I carry you with me. Every token of affection we've discovered tells the same story. A jade bracelet from Beijing, a silver coin from Damascus, pressed flowers from an oasis garden. Each one proof that love creates its own economy, where the currency is tenderness, where the only exchange rate is sincerity, where every gift is priceless. The most beautiful truth we've learned is this: love makes travelers of us all. We may never leave our hometown, but our hearts journey across oceans of possibility, seeking that perfect companion, that understanding soul, that person whose laughter sounds like coming home. The Silk Road exists wherever two hearts dare to meet. In every story we've shared, strangers became soulmates in a single evening. Language barriers dissolved in the warmth of genuine affection. Cultural differences became fascinating discoveries rather than obstacles. This is the miracle of human connection. How quickly walls can become windows. How easily fear transforms into fascination. When hearts are open to love, the road continues beyond our stories. Somewhere tonight, new travellers are making their way across unfamiliar territories. Some journeying through physical landscapes, others navigating the geography of the heart. All of them carrying the same hope that drove those ancient wanderers. The belief that love waits somewhere ahead, patient as starlight. Every heart is a traveller on the Silk Road of love, seeking connection, gathering experiences like precious cargo, trading stories for understanding, bartering loneliness for companionship. We are all merchants of the heart, offering our authentic selves in exchange for acceptance, hoping someone will find our goods worthy of keeping, our love worth treasuring. The ancient Silk Road has faded into memory, but the Silk Road of hearts remains eternal. It runs through coffee shops and airports, through online conversations and chance encounters, through every moment when strangers choose kindness over suspicion, when travellers choose connection over isolation, when hearts choose courage over fear. This road never ends. As we close these tales of distant lovers, remember that your own story waits to be written. Your own connections wait to be discovered, perhaps in your neighbourhood, perhaps across the world, perhaps closer than you think. The same stars that watched over ancient caravans still shine above you, still witness love in all its forms. Thank you for travelling with us along these pathways of the heart, for listening with compassion to stories of love across cultures and centuries, for believing in the power of human connection. Your presence has made this journey complete. Like those ancient travellers, we are richer for having shared this road together. May your own heart find its Silk Road. May you travel it with courage and wonder. May you meet fellow wanderers who understand your language, and may you always remember that love is the most precious cargo any traveller can carry. Sweet dreams. Until we meet again on the endless road of hearts and history.